What do ancient European churches and 2,000-year-old Sanskrit chants actually have to do with that plastic keyboard sitting in your living room? I mean, it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, doesn't it? But the reality is actually far more fascinating. You see, every single time a 5-year-old places their hands on a modest 61-key portable keyboard today, they're touching the very tip of a massive iceberg. They're interacting with centuries of mechanical invention on one side and this deeply profound ancient pedagogical tradition on the other.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're kicking things off with Chapter 1, Introduction to Keyboard Education. We're going to explore this incredible dual history, specifically looking at how the Akhil Bharatiya Gandharva Mahavidyalaya Mandal, or, ABGMVM for short, has completely integrated a Western instrument into the teaching of Indian classical music. It is honestly an epic historical convergence. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. First up, the evolution of the keyboard. Number 2, the roots of Indian classical music. 3, democratizing music education. And finally, what all of this means for the modern music teacher. Let's dive right into Section 1, the evolution of the keyboard. To really get this instrument, you have to realize it wasn't just invented overnight. It's actually this long, fascinating chain of inventions, where each new version solved a massive headache the previous one couldn't. It all starts way back in antiquity with the pipe organ. Now, the organ established the absolute most crucial visual concept any beginner learns. One key equals one exact pitch, mapped out in a perfect straight line from low on the left to high on the right. Then jump to the 1300s and up through the 1700s, and you get smaller domestic instruments, like the clavichord and the harpsichord, bringing that straight line concept right into people's living rooms. And that chain of innovation? It leads straight to the 1980s, when companies like Yamaha and Casio started mass-producing affordable electronic keyboards, making it possible for millions of households to actually learn the instrument.
But here's the thing. For nearly 300 years, musicians were stuck with this incredibly frustrating trade-off. Take the clavichord. It was genuinely touch-sensitive, meaning if you press the key harder, the tone actually changed. Beautiful, right? Except it was whisper quiet. If you wanted to play for more than, say, 3 people in a room, you were basically out of luck. Now the harpsichord solved that volume problem. It plucked the strings with a little quill, making it loud enough to entertain entire courts. But because a quill either plucks or it doesn't, pressing the key harder did absolutely nothing to the volume. It was completely touch blind. So how did they finally solve a 3-century-old problem? Right around the year 1700, in Florence, an instrument maker named Bartolomeo Cristofori came up with an absolute game-changer. Instead of plucking the string, he built a mechanism using tiny hammers that struck the string and instantly bounced away. Because the hammer's speed relied entirely on how hard you hit the key, musicians could finally play both softly and loudly on the exact same instrument. He literally named it the instrument with soft and loud, the pianoforte. And that touch-sensitive breakthrough? That is the exact same feeling your modern digital piano is electronically recreating right now.
Moving on to Section 2, Roots of Indian Classical. Because while Western inventors were obsessing over hammers and strings, an entirely different, intensely profound musical evolution was happening over in India. We're talking about one of the oldest continuously practiced art music traditions on the planet. Over 2,000 years ago, you had systematic melody being documented in the chanting of the Samaveda, using these really fixed patterns of rising and falling pitch. Centuries after that, the Sanskrit text Natya Shastra laid down foundational concepts like swara, musical notes, and rasa, the aesthetic emotion you get from a performance. And keep in mind, this was long before staff notation was a thing anywhere in the world. Eventually, the tradition split into the Hindustani and Carnatic streams, and by the 19th century, the famous Gharana system had fully taken root in North India. Now, the Gharana system was completely built around distinct family lineages. Knowledge was handed down through the Guru-Shishya Parampara, this incredibly deep, often lifelong apprenticeship between teacher and disciple. And it produced, frankly, an extraordinary depth of mastery. But it came with a massive roadblock. Serious classical music education was essentially locked up in a vault. It was highly restricted to a very small group of hereditary musician families and just a handful of outsiders. For centuries, regular, everyday people, they simply had no access to this knowledge.
Which brings us to Section 3, democratizing music education.
Going from a closed, secretive system to a completely open one took nothing short of a cultural revolution. In the early 20th century, 2 absolute titans stepped onto the scene, Pandit Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande and Pandit Vishnu Digambar Paluskar. But Conde traveled all over, documenting these wildly inconsistent oral traditions from different Quranas and weaving them together into a coherent framework you could actually teach. Then, Paluskar took the baton and ran with it, founding the first Gandharva Mahavidyalaya back in 1901. Together, these two took an exclusive apprenticeship-only world and transformed it into structured schools with written notation and actual graded syllabi.
Paluskar had this conviction that was honestly incredibly radical for the time. He firmly believed that serious, high-quality music education shouldn't just be a VIP privilege for a lucky few. It had to be available to any sincere student who wanted to learn, and at a minimal cost. His whole goal was to train ethical, disciplined musicians and teachers, pulling the music straight out of the exclusive royal courts and placing it right into the hands of the public. And the ripple effect of that philosophy? It's just staggering. To put it into perspective, today the organization carrying his mission forward, the ABGMVM, examines well over 1 lakh students. That is over 100,000 students every single year, all across India and globally. The democratization of this ancient knowledge has been a resounding, massive success. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 4, the modern music teacher. So how do these two giant, sweeping histories, the mechanical evolution of the keyboard and the deep philosophy of Indian classical music, actually crash together in a classroom today? It happens because of the literal magic of the keyboard itself. It gives a student immediate pitch logic. Think about it. A 5-year-old beginner doesn't have to suffer through years of scratchy bowing technique or exhausting breath control just to hit one correct note. They press a key and bam, exact, in-tune pitch. It completely lowers the technical barrier and keeps kids motivated. Plus, it makes harmony and drone notes totally visible, acting as the ultimate bridge to teach Indian sargam-based melody right alongside foundational Western concepts. And in that environment, the teacher isn't just standing there lecturing, it's a highly active loop. The teacher demonstrates a pattern, the student imitates it, using both their ears and their eyes. The teacher gives specific, encouraging feedback, and then the student practices it independently. It's this continuous, child-centered cycle where learning happens by actually doing. But let's be real, the teacher is not in this alone. The parent's role is just as crucial, but the boundaries have to be crystal clear. The teacher's domain? That's technique. They are the ones who demonstrate and correct. The parent's role is purely to observe and encourage. Seriously, emphatically, do not correct technique at home. We've all seen the well-meaning parent trying to backseat drive a piano practice using half-remembered terms. It almost always ends in friction and tears. The parent provides the space and celebrates the effort. The teacher handles the actual musical mechanics. Being the guide in this whole process demands next-level professionalism. Earning a family's trust is about so much more than just knowing where middle C is. You have to uphold strict ethics. We're talking absolute reliability, treating every kid fairly no matter their natural talent, and giving totally honest assessments. You never inflate a student's readiness just to make a parent happy. It means keeping confidentiality, ensuring child safety at all times, and above all, maintaining a really deep respect for the integrity of the classical tradition itself. Because at the end of the day, you aren't just running through a syllabus. If you're a music teacher in this system, you are literally the guardian of a dual legacy. You are taking centuries of mechanical brilliance from Western inventors, combining it with millennia of profound musical philosophy from ancient Indian sages, and you are the bridge passing all of that down to the next generation. It's an unbelievable privilege. So I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on. Now that you actually see the sheer depth of what is sitting right beneath those plastic keys, how will understanding this centuries-old history change the very next lesson you teach to a 5-year-old? When they press that first note, remember, they are making history. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.